So I've just arrived here at BoxerWorks to see Fred, having been on the review of the MT-09, which might have been posted yet. I don't know which order I'm going to do it. Anyway, a phenomenal bike. But there was something I wanted to chat to Fred about that I think, because Fred's experience in racing off-road, particularly on the GS in the Trophy, GS Trophy Cup, is that what it's called?
International GS Trophy.
Yeah, that one too. And his experience as an instructor, that I've said to him once, I said that the GS is the best bike. And there was a bit of contention about whether it really is for one particular reason, and that's the setup and how the forks are set up on the GS. So I'm going to now turn and speak to Fred specifically. So what do you think the compromise is on those forks compared to its competition?
For off-road riding?
Yeah.
Well, obviously the sort of major thing with that Telelever front end is the fact it doesn't dive under braking. Mm-hmm. But you'll see on every conventional off-road bike, you've got, whether it be a conventional sort of upside down fork or standard fork, you brake, that front end dives, and in doing so, you're pushing that front wheel and tyre into the terrain. Mm-hmm. You know, so whether it be rock, mud, anything, it's pushing in, it's gripping, and consequently it just steepens up that head angle, allows for you to turn in, the same as braking on a conventional suspension setup of a road bike. But the biggest thing is you just get that grip factor with adding the pressure over the front end.
Would you say that's only really noticeable then at aggressive riding, if you're a normal Joe Blow riding off-road?
Yeah, I think with how good and how well balanced the GS is in particular, it can mask a lot of the sort of shortcomings when it comes to the off-road riding. So if you're just riding at a steady pace, you're not a big off-road guy, then it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. But it's when you get into mud and that terrain's slippery, it just doesn't hold the ground like a conventional front end setup would.
So I would say you've probably ridden more bikes than most then. So what do you think stands what was the 1250, now the 1300? What stands it apart in your opinion?
Well, I think ultimately they're road bikes. So the fact that they're so well balanced, they don't feel top heavy. In fact, quite the opposite. I think they feel pretty light to ride. Yeah. And they've just got the balance right, and you're entering corners, and where you're braking and still getting that braking force down, because you're then not diving so much on the road, you're not unsettling the bike either. Mm-hmm. So you can brake hard and still tip into a corner without feeling that front end coming back up. So they just make for a bloody great road bike as well.
So do you think then, if there was the equivalent to the International Trophy for Ducati or Triumph or KTM, that they would stand up as well as the GS does, or would they do better?
Depends, I think model-wise, if you were to take, you've got the Desert X rally version, you've got the Tenere, those bikes already are far more off-road orientated and based than a GS. Mm-hmm. So the capabilities of them are higher. What you could do in the Trophy is higher.
But even if it was a multi-strada, let's say?
Multi-strada, don't know, again, I think you've got weight that's distributed differently, but you've still got that conventional front end setup, and for off-road riding, it just means you can put it where you want it. It's a lot easier to get it to track over things. You're not going to deflect as much as you do with the GS front end off square edges and things like that. So I think the standard of riding could be higher on a conventional suspension setup across the range of all sort of manufacturers, really.
No, interesting. So the one thing I'll share a link to this as the suggested video, is when you took out my 1300 after you did the service, and that's the video I'll share, what was it that you felt about the 1300 for all the 1250s you've ridden, for all the years you've ridden, that you went, this is a fundamentally better bike?
Just thought the engine felt smooth, gearbox was nice, and I don't know, I didn't ride it for long enough to properly be able to comment, but the way it just hugged the road, it felt like it was truly hunkered down.
Do you think that's down to the stiffness of the chassis potentially, or?
Don't know. I need to do more miles on it, but you know, whether it's they've obviously revised the suspension, that's improved. They've tweaked the bike, the chassis, as you just mentioned. It's all different. So I'd have to put more miles on it to have a better sort of understanding and be able to say what it is in particular. But just as an overall bike, I thought, yeah, it's the best GS by far.
No, that's a really good point, because that's what I think too. But one last question then. Out of all the major manufacturers and their larger adventure bikes, why are you putting your money into BMW and not the other brands?
In terms of working on them, or just for what I have
For what you have personally?
I just enjoy it. I think it's a robust bike. They're fairly, obviously got all the electronics, but there's still things you can fundamentally do to them if you're out on a true adventure that you'd struggle to do on the other bikes. And I just think as an all-round bike, it's so hard to beat. You can ride off-road, you can ride on-road. Mine at the minute, I got a set of Karoo 4s on, and I'm still getting it to the edge of the tyre. So even with aggressive tyres, you can still ride it hard on the road. So I just think, it's just the most versatile bike, comfortable. You can have long days in the saddle with loads of different riding experiences all in one day. So
perfect, thank you.
Helpful.
So you heard it here first. You heard it from Fred, that buy a GS. I'll put a link to his website below. But Fred services my bike. In fact, he serviced my Ducati Monster today, and he did my 1300 GS. And there's no one else I'm having fix my bikes. And interestingly, my son brought his CB125 here to have his brakes looked at. So Fred takes care of all bikes. He prefers the big ones, but he will lend his hand to any problem you've got mechanically. And his website's below, so feel free to get in touch. Also, if you could subscribe, that'd be awesome. Cheers.
Cheers.